So, this is the first chapter of class 12th psychology, which is variations in psychological attributes. So, the introduction. If you observe your friends, classmates, or relatives, you will find how they differ from each other in the manner they perceive, learn, and think, as also in their performance on various tasks. Such individual differences can be noticed in every walk of life. So these individual differences are what we call attributes, and the attributes of most people, every person will be different. So take the example of someone who's sort of just rude to you, does not talk as much to you. When they talk to you, they're when you talk to them, they sort of ignore you. Do you think they'll be the same with other people as well? Probably not. So, this is also a part of their attributes and the way that they communicate with different people differently. That people differ from one another is obvious. In class 11th, you have learned about psychological principles that are applied to understand human behavior. We also need to understand how people differ, what brings about these differences, and how such differences can be assessed. So, mainly, what we'll be learning in this chapter is what are attributes and what brings out these different attributes in different people and how we can assess these differences. You will recall how one of the main concerns of modern psychology has been the study of individual differences from the time of Galton. This chapter will introduce you to some of the fundamentals of individual differences. One of the most popular psychological attributes which has been of interest to psychologists is intelligence. People differ from one another in their ability to understand complex ideas, adapt to environment, learn from experience, engage in various forms of reasoning, and to overcome obstacles. In this chapter, you will learn the nature of intelligence. You will study the nature of intelligence, changing definitions of intelligence, cultural differences in intelligence, range and variations in the intellectual competencies of people, and the nature of special abilities or aptitudes. So, we'll really be focusing on studying intelligence in this chapter. So, think about it. Different people will probably assess intelligence differently. Like, mostly our intelligence is assessed on the basis of what grades we score. But even though most people will say that grades are not a correct assessment of our intelligence, because see, it is also psychological that at the time of exam we will be under stress, and under immense pressure we can make mistakes in questions that are some of the easiest questions. So, this is why some people may consider grades to not be a correct evaluation or assessment of intelligence. And then there's IQ. But then, even if we take IQ as an assessment of humans, then think about it. There might be people who have a very great IQ, but they might not be using it every day, right? They might be just doing mundane tasks and not improving or practicing. Think about some children who were on top of the grade in, say, grade 4th or grade 5th. And by the end of grade 9th or 10th, they probably were not at the top of the grade. So, what is the reason for that? I'm not saying everyone, but there will be some people who scored like above 95% till maybe 7th or 8th grade, but then suddenly they stopped and they started scoring maybe around 90% or even less than that. So, what is the reason for that? They probably had high IQ, right? If they could score that much at such a young age. But when we do not develop that IQ, see, uh, for example, you're given some easy exercises in grade 3rd, and you are able to complete those exercises in like 1 hour when all the other students in your class are able to complete those in 3 hours. And then you complete those in 1 hour, and the rest of the time you spend playing. You are really not developing your skills as much, because at the end of the day, you will have to learn much harder concepts which you'll not be able to when you'll not be able to sit for hours and study those, as compared to the kids who had to spend 3 hours solving those exercises. They will have a much bigger sitting capacity. So yeah, this was just an example. Okay, so let's move to the first topic: individual differences in human functioning. Individual variations are common within and across all species. Variations add color and beauty to nature. For a moment, think of a world around you where each and every object is of the same color, say red or blue or green. How would the world appear to you? Certainly not a beautiful one. Would you prefer to live in such a world? In all likelihood, your answer will be no. Like objects, people too possess different combinations of traits. So, first of all, what was the first thing that came to your mind when you read this? Okay, I'll tell the first thing that came to my mind when I read this was DNA. Because variations, right? We studied in 10th grade that how variations occur because of errors in DNA copying and all. But here we are probably not talking about DNA variations. But it's also really important to think about the first thing that you think when you read a passage. And then when you go back and read it again, you will probably not think of the same thing. And this is why it's important to read something again and again to understand something properly. Because your second reading. Yeah, so I was saying that this is why it's important to read something again and again to understand something properly. Okay. Variability is a fact of nature, and individuals are no exception to this. They vary in terms of physical characters such as height, weight, strength, hair color, and so on. They also vary along psychological dimensions. They may be intelligent or dull, dominant or submissive, creative or not so creative, outgoing or withdrawn, etc. The list of variations can be endless. Different traits can exist in varying degrees in an individual. In this sense, each one of us is unique as she or he exemplifies a typical combination of various traits. The question which you may like to pose is how and why people differ. This, in fact, is the subject matter of the study of individual differences. For psychologists, individual differences refer to distinctiveness and variations among people's characteristics and behavior patterns. So, first of all, think of this. The first characters that they state are physical characteristics such as height, weight, strength, hair color, and so on. So these characteristics are the one that your DNA determines. So these are purely biological, and you have no role in determining what these characteristics will be. Maybe not including weight all the time, because yeah, obviously your weight can increase and decrease depending on your diet too. But yeah, a lot of the times weight is hereditary too. So let's move on to the next one. Psychological dimensions: intelligent or dull, dominant or submissive, creative or not so creative, outgoing or withdrawn. So in 9th grade or 10th grade, I think, we studied that traits such as maybe you're good at one sport or you're an introvert or an extrovert is not coming from your DNA. It may match to your parents because you've stayed in such an environment for so long, and there are many other factors that contribute to it, but your DNA does not determine what your psychological dimensions will be. Most of the times, it's your environment and other characteristics which we'll be studying further in this chapter. So, while many psychologists believe that our behaviors are influenced by our personal traits, some others hold the view that our behaviors are influenced more by situational factors. Yeah, so these situational factors was what I was talking about. Say you were raised by someone who was sort of aggressive, right? So you may have looked up to them and thought that, oh, right, they're aggressive. Then some people think that this is how you treat other people, and those people may go on to become bullies. But then other people might think that, oh, this person treats me like this, and I certainly do not want to become like this person, and they might become the total opposite. They might become timid. And a lot of psychological differences or characteristics or dimensions, they can be explained on the basis of situationism. Okay, so this latter view is known as situationism, which states that situations and circumstances in which one is placed influences one's behavior. A person who is generally aggressive may behave in a submissive manner in the presence of his or her boss. Sometimes the situational influences are so powerful that individuals with differing personality traits respond to them in almost the same ways. The situationist perspective views human behavior relatively more as a result of influence of external factors. Okay, so suppose you're in front of your mom, who's like chill and doesn't really scold you as much. Of course, if you are asking her for something, say like a sweet or maybe ice cream or something, you'll be much more, like, Mom, please get me this again and again. But say if your father is the one who's sort of scolds you a lot, you will not speak in the same tone to him, right? You may speak in a different manner to him and you might not ask the same thing twice. So this is another example of situationism. Okay, so we'll end this video here and we'll study the next topic in the next video.